Hello and welcome, fellow Game of Thrones and board game fans. My brother and I came up with an idea to make a 7 and a 9 game version of the game, and I'd like to show it to you guys. So first of all, I'm going to show you the 7 game version. So this is the 6-player version of the game, just normal board game as it is right now. Fantasy Flight has an expansion which is called Feast of Crows that adds a 4-player scenario where one of the factions is House Aaron. Now, for this particular game, we thought it is a pretty good idea to put as the 7th faction House Aaron as well. So normally when you play with a 4-player scenario, the game tells you to use Tyrell's pieces. Well, for 7 players you can't use them because they're already being used. So we actually got in and made new pieces. How I made them I will get to later. Now, for House Aaron we need a lot more castles. So what we did, we designed a new overlay that you just pretty much place right over here. And House Aaron starts right there. The setup, as it is normal in the game, is usually displayed on the backside of their cover shield. Here, for instance, we have House Lannister. And we made the same for House Aaron, where all of the setup is displayed as well. Since this kind of interferes with the influence tracks over here, we added another overlay, actually sidelay, whatever you want to call it. And pretty much every spot they would take up, they move everybody else down. So they start kind of balanced out. We did a lot of math, we did a lot of testing. It works out fine the way that we have designed it. And of course we had to go in and make all of the other necessary pieces that are required for the game. And also the power tokens and the orders. Now when it comes to the house cards, which are very important in the game, we decided that we're going to take the same ones that are in the Feast of Crow expansion. So we have here, these would be the normal ones that come with the expansion, and these are ours. They look a little bit different and they are foiled, which was a good idea on our part because that way you don't have so much wear and tear on the cards. Now let's get a little bit closer so you guys can actually see them. So here a little bit closer you can actually see the back sides of the cover shields, and there you can see you have the setup as it is supposed to be put down, all of the different tracks they're on and everything else. Just as a comparison so you guys see how the main game has it and the way we did it. Even if you compare pieces, they look similar, but the thing is, I mean, they even sound similar. The only thing I could not do was get them as shiny. How I did them, I get to later. Also, just the power tokens and orders are all pretty much same looking as they do in the normal game. And here you have the setup of the 7th player where they have 3 castles available instead of just 1. So they start out with a stronghold and they have 2 castles available. They also have a port over here, and we added another sea area. As you can see, that helps them to be a little bit more protected and gives them a better survivability. Now the faction is a little bit harder to play because these cards from the expansion are actually made for the scenario. So they are very power token heavy, which means they pretty much fight most for on the influence tracks, and the higher they get, the easier they have it. They're special to play, they're not as easy as other factions might be, but they fit very good into the game, and I think it worked out fine. So far they have won twice out of a 10 game trial. Alright, let's move on. So, now we come to the 8 and 9 player variant, which requires a complete new game board. To say about this game board is my brother designed it. He used the old map and photoshopped it and added the continent of Essos to make the Targaryens available, and the other faction that is added is House Tully. House Aaron is already printed on here this time, so this is 8 and 9 player version. For the 8 player version only Westeros is being used, and Essos is being cut off, so no player is allowed to move over the seas here. But if you want to use the 9-player variant, Essos is available and the Targaryens start out right here. Now, because there's so much more players, as you can see, the influence tracks are nowhere on the board, as well as the victory track is not on the board. The board is a little bit bigger. The thing is, as you can see, it's just a little bit wider by about 10 or 15 centimeters on each side. But to save some space, because not all people have big tables, we designed our own influence tracks that you can put anywhere on the board as you like, as well as the victory track. Now let's get into a close-up. So this is the setup for House Tully. As you might realize, it is pretty closed in by a lot of other factions, as well as they do not start out with a ship. So for them to start out, they start out with a second knight. They're balanced. It took us some time to figure this out, but they have options. They have a port here, so they could fight the Greyjoys, or they could go over to the Eyrie, or they can go south towards Baratheon, or the Lannisters, or even go north. So they have all the options that they want. Of course, we designed, once again, a nice little protective shield, as well as the startup is on the backside. Now, when it comes to the cards, one thing about these cards is we looked at some ideas that other people had for 9-player variants of the game, and we borrowed some of their artwork and some of their ideas, added our own, and changed it a little bit. So I'm just going to flip through these cards a little bit. You're not going to see it too much because other people came up to it. If you ask about them, I can post them. I just have to check in with the original creators if I'm allowed to make these available to you. Let's move on to the Targaryens. So, the 9th player, House Targaryen. Once again, we have the shield and the setup, as you can see right here. And they start out here on Essos. They start out with 2 ships, just as same as Baratheon does. And they have multiple options where they can go. They can try to hold only their little continent right here, or they can start advancing towards Westeros whenever they please. One of the restrictions they have right here, Braavos actually has a little protective neutral force that has a strength of 6. So they can't take this at the very beginning. It takes them a little while to get this. 2 crowns is very strong, even though they can be raided from anywhere around. But we thought it was balanced, and we figured it is balanced because we've tested it multiple times. Now when it comes to the tracks, I wanted to show you guys our first version where you can actually see the setup of all of the factions. But because it was too bright and it a little bit confusing when you did move them around, we changed it up a little bit. It doesn't show up so well on the camera, but as you can see, they're quietly faded out and you can still make out what is supposed to be placed there. And that saved us to make these shields for the 9th and 8th player version, where we would have to print on every single setup that they have. Now, what we did, because some of the startup is different for some of the regular 6-player factions, and once again we didn't make more of these shields, we came up to just add these cards here that determine where a player starts. So as you can see, House Tyrell's setup, House Aaron's setup for 8 and 9 players, Lannister setup, Stark setup, Greyjoy setup, Baratheon setup, and Martell setup. Now, one of the last few things that you will notice is one of the ideas that other people had is to add a 4th Westeros deck. So starting the 6th round, there's going to be cards drawn from the 4th Westeros deck. These cards are optional, but they are pretty evil. Some of them can harm pretty much everybody. Some of them are very fortunate and good, but other than that, they're pretty cool. Once again, I have to check in with the original creators if we're allowed to make these available to you or not. Now let's move on to one thing that is very important about this particular map. Okay, so the last important thing to show you what is different about the map here are black lines. Black lines are impassable in any way, so no player can move through them. We had to put these in place because it is really crowded in this area, but other than that, there's no new rules, no differences, nothing has changed except these black lines. Okay, so one of the things I still promised you guys to show you how I did the pieces to make them sound and feel the same as the original pieces. What they're made of is resin. I used this here, it is German so you probably can't read it, a resin which I put into these little stamps that I made of the original pieces, let them dry out, then they turn out clear like this. You still had to file them a little bit and grind them off, and once that was done the only thing you had left was paint them. And for paint I used my Warhammer paint that I use for my normal figurines. They're from the company is called Citadel, I think. And yeah, that's how I made the game pieces for the new factions. So this is our 7, 8 and 9 player version of the game. I hope you guys liked it and enjoyed it. If you have any questions whatsoever, feel free to ask. Once again, I have to remind you, I don't know if I can make all of these available to you, but you can ask nevertheless. I can tell you how I did certain things, like we used linen, book linen to make the map right here so you can fold it all up the way you want it. And that's that. Thank you guys for watching, and for any questions, just comment below in the comment section. And until next time.